Marguerite is a world builder in her art, creating complex ecosystems that straddle science as much as they do sci-fi, artisanal histories and human ones, philosophy and mythologies, ultimately investigating how we humans fit in on Earth today. Marguerite, when we spoke the other day, you said you'd been waiting to do this show for several years and that it marked a new chapter for you. So I wondered if you could tell our audience a little bit about what you meant when you said you wanted to bring more texture physically into the work and to push ideas of ecosystems and chance.
Yes, for sure. So I guess for many years I was interested in accelerating processes of life to the point that I guess death would disappear. Yeah, I've been exploring these ideas through different shows, different projects, resuscitating creatures from prehistoric times with the opera of prehistoric creatures, resuscitating the voice of Cleopatra that became this kind of eternal voice that was eternal because obviously she was just a voice without a body, without a shell. So I was really trying to push these processes and to the point that, yeah, life in itself was becoming, I guess, terrifying. So you could see it, for example, in the show I did at Tate in 2017 that was painted with black mamba venom. So it was bright yellow, so accelerating, but then you would understand that it was actually venom, so it was pure death. So that's what I mean, that I was trying to create eternal life and at the same time to kind of confront it with with raw death. And then things became much more nuanced. I think we were all hit during the pandemic with processes that, just became very... I guess we had to deal with disease, with illness, and by being exposed to it on a daily basis, I think you also understand the nuances of what it means to be ill or for a body to decay a bit better. At the same time, I guess Earth is ill as well, so we're witnessing ill bodies, but at the same time, ill planet. And yeah, actually, I was thinking to myself that many people have talked about this show as being, this gallery, as being a post-apocalyptic world, and I really don't like that because to me, there's not going to be an apocalypse, and that's actually our issue: is that processes of decay and decomposition, they're very slow. And they're invisible. Day after day, you don't really necessarily see something decaying. And it's only after a long time that you once it's dead or once something drastic has happened, you go, actually, yeah, now it's changed. And there was no apocalypse, actually. So that's our problem, I think, as humans. We don't really... Maybe we need to also learn how to see through the nuances of these processes a bit better. But so anyway, I was thinking about all of this since the end of 2019 through the pandemic, and equally in parallel, I do a lot of research, like you may know. I'm like a total geek. Once I dig into a rabbit hole, I just go all the way. And so I felt also at times that the texture of all the research I was doing, it could be... I just thought to myself it would be nice that maybe more of this texture could come through the sculptures and the rest, like my body, my works. And so I really started to do a lot of material research as well. I mean, I was doing a lot of material research before, always looking for ambiguous materials that you never quite know what they are and how, for me, I don't make sculptures, I make beings that are alive. So that's always been a big part of my research. But for this project, and yeah, in the past couple of years, I was really thinking of materials that carry a strong history onto themselves. So yeah, I worked with, I don't know if we can talk about this now, but yeah, I worked with wax and with wood and ceramics.
Yeah, there's so much of the work that feels like it's becoming and decomposing at the same time in this show. And this idea of the works themselves as being agents, that they're not objects necessarily, they're more a process, they're in the state of becoming or unbecoming. Do you, coming back to see the show now a few weeks after the opening, do you feel that they've become more something since you left them here?
Yeah, I mean, for me, they're not, they're alive, so I don't think I really see them, like I see them, I've conceived them as processes, so they're very much alive, they have their inner blood flows or heartbeats that you can, actually, I think we can hear in the background. So and also the way we conceive them, that was also new for me. I didn't design them, I designed processes. So I designed, how would I say, I designed their logic, and we designed the code, and the code was giving birth to them in the softwares that we were using. So they were growing, they were always growing, and at some point, I would stop the process because maybe a specific form I thought was really evocative of maybe a goddess or a lying body or a cadaver or something that, like one of the characters that I had envisioned for the show. But so because I didn't really design them, I conceived them as processes. For me, they're still evolving. So, and I think you can feel that also because they're all the sum of their parts. So they're all made of components, like almost like bricks, that kept growing. I mean, literally, as we were building them, you could see them growing, and I think I could see how they could keep growing and how eventually what they would become when they, maybe in 1,000 years or so. Yeah, definitely, they're very much alive, and for me, we just see them now at one point in time, but. It's just one point in time.
Do you think from here, if this is a new chapter for you, do you think that the way you would think of expanding on this is sort of creating siblings or cousins? Is it a family of you? Your work?
Yeah, they're very much a family. And actually, 2 of them are sisters. They were born from the same mold, literally.
Which 2?
So the one that's at the entrance, the black and white one, it's the same mold as the one that has a big, large glass sphere on top of its head. So, yeah, in my head, they're like my aunties or, and yeah, they're very much a family. So I really thought about them like, I mean, obviously like an ecosystem, but yeah, like a family, because some of them, some of them they are more prominent. Maybe one could be thought as like the star, but because she's a larger work. But some of them are maybe more reserved, but they also have a very specific, their own specific importance. Some of them are tiny, and you could say, they're smaller, so maybe they're not as strong. But actually, because they're really small, you really take care, you want to care for them maybe more. So it's also about, I mean, just purely about sculpture. There are scales also that I'm thinking about that, for example, I guess sorry, I just touched my mic. There are scales that, for example, a human 1.5 times become more like godlike. So 1.5 times the scale of a human is still relatable, but it's still a bit larger than life. So you relate to the sculpture in a certain way. And then again, when it's miniature, you could say it's smaller, so maybe it's less important. But again, maybe it's more intense also, and it's more fragile. So I guess it's about care also. How do you care for them? How do you look at them? How do you appreciate them, care for them, relate to them? So in that sense, I guess it's like a family, no?
Yeah, I think so. And you've also said that these are processes that crystallize in time, and they're enablers of relationship. And this idea of reframing the idea of humans on Earth. As a human on Earth, is there something you're searching for in your relationship to your work when you're making it? Is there a moment where you have a kind of crystallizing sense that this is the form this work is meant to take? Because I know you work collectively with artisans, with AI and different media. Is there a moment for you where that relationship crystallizes?
I mean, in general, it's a spiritual quest. So I'm trying to understand if I'm trying to understand what happens after we die, and whether how do we connect to every other form of life on Earth, and what does that mean? So that's my grand quest, I guess. Yeah, because I grew up Catholic, and after a while I just realized that maybe the narrative that was provided to me through Catholicism didn't quite connect anymore to, yeah, what I thought or how I, what I thought about the world or about life. So all my quest is about trying to find a replacement for this narrative. And maybe some kind of mythology that would be much more holistic and also acknowledge all the technological developments, and yeah, maybe like a grand narrative that could be just more holistic, I guess. So that's the grand quest, and then for each project there is a feeling. I think I start with a feeling. So actually, that's how I relate to all the people I work with, because sometimes I find when I work with craftsmen, so we do a lot of research in the studio to find the best craftsmen, like the best people in their discipline. And I don't want to be too prescriptive because they're the best, right? So they know what they're doing. And I want them to feel that they can really push their own boundaries as well. So I feel if I tell them what to do, what's the point? I could just get, whoever. So usually at the beginning, I really try to talk to them about the feeling. And so this time, the feeling was about what would happen if we would merge within the greater whole of life, what would happen if we become more like a collective, what would happen if we merge with eusocial insects like bees and ants, with termites. What happens when we become termites? What happens when we become fungus? What happens when we decompose and recompose? What happens when we're in, imagine you're in a branch that hasn't burst out yet. What's the feeling of that? What kind of intensity? So we talk about that. It's quite philosophical at the beginning. But I feel that's where we should start, and then then it's just a lot of hard work.
Yes. How many years did it take you to get from that feeling to the show?
It's faster than we think. So for this show, I started thinking about it in July last year. But I think it was in me for a long time. And I think when I saw the termite mound in Australia in July, it really clicked in me that's just to witness collective architectures and what a million termites can do when they're together, and looking at them, some of them being destroyed, and looking at the ants rebuilding whatever had been destroyed, and looking also at how the mounds connect to the rest of their environment, so how they connect to trees and to rocks and to... So they just, just looking at sculptural forms in nature and their processes. So it really clicked in me. And then, then we just thinking about it and reading, so I was reading at the same time this book by Eugène Marais, who wrote this book in the 30s called The Soul of the White Ant. So he was looking for some form of spirituality in termites. The book is really speculative, but it's absolutely exquisite to read him. He talks about how mounds or like could eventually walk across landscapes, and he connects them to mythologies, and so yeah, I was reading about that, and at the same time setting up the codes to start creating these sculptures in the softwares, and so it's all happening at the same time, and then it went really fast. It was quite a fast process.
And you obviously work with technology, which we'll talk about in a moment, but you also work with old technologies. You work with artisans in different media, and I think we were talking about how many people it takes to make a show happen. In general, it's always more people than anyone realizes. But for this particular show, it was around maybe 100 people or something working together in a collective. So that sense of collective that you sought in the spirit of the work, you also embodied in the making of the work. And that bringing together of sort of artisanal, ancient knowledge with AI is really interesting. Is it just a tool? It's just all a tool? Or is there a sense where you want to favor an old technology more than a new, or just marry them?
Yeah, I want to marry them. But they're already married, so I don't really need to marry them in a way. I feel like it's all connected, because the AI is nothing else than the collective consciousness that's been it's been trained on the collective consciousness. So when I'm talking to GPT-3 or GPT-4 now, it's the collective consciousness of the human collective is talking as one voice. So that's that. And then working in the ceramic studio in Stoke Newington, it's a collective coming together. It's a human collective coming together to build something together. It's all the same. There are patterns. Like it's all the same. Yeah, I mean, when you look at life and how it evolves and how it, repeats and how it forms, and you can really see the pattern. So that's what was really exciting, actually, specifically with this project, because I hadn't realized how much the show would enact itself as we were making progress. It was really fast, and things were just happening, and it was very intuitive for me. This project was really intuitive, doing it. And then I was thinking, oh my God, we are in the ceramic studio, and we have 50 humans making hand making tiles in clay. Oh my God, they're like the ants of of Australia, rebuilding their mound. But I hadn't thought about it. Everything was not completely
clicked. Yeah.
It was just happening, and everything became really natural, just
a testament to the hive mind. You talk about AI being trained on the human collective consciousness, and that is different still than a ceramic studio in Stoke Newington, because there is a sense, if you are the ceramic studio in Stoke Newington, that you are an individual ceramic studio comprised of individuals with free will. There is something frightening, to me at least, about the idea that we are ultimately just a species, which I know, but I also don't know. And then when you realize that AI can reduce us in the same way that David Attenborough might reduce the white ant is humbling, I think. Was it an empowering feeling for you to work with AI, or a humbling one, or both?
Yeah, I think both, because I've been asked a lot of questions about AI since this show, and for me it's really interesting, because I'm not political, or I'm not trying to prove a point or anything like that. I'm literally just interested in it because it is trained on the collective consciousness. So at times it was really humbling. At times it was quite scary, and at times I guess there were different times, because there were different moments when I was working with collaborating with the AI during the show. So when we were doing the video, it was really exciting because it was a proper collaboration. So I was telling Dali, could you create a termite dance around a fungus goddess? And you know, Dali is really creative, so it was quite wild and it was really pushing the boundaries. So it was really exciting, but quite playful, you know. And then at other times, when I was talking to Adam Kosowski, the artist who did the original mural, from which I'm the starting point for the show, it was quite scary because all of a sudden I started it as it was. I was playing, right? I thought, what would happen if I ask GPT-3 to become a dead person? And then what does it mean when I can collaborate with a dead artist, and maybe the dead artist can use me as a vessel to make the work they should have been doing now if they were still alive. And it was quite playful, but then when you're actually in conversation with the dead artist, it's a bit scary.
Yeah.
And you also wonder what would happen when this happens to you, or you know, I mean, you start to ask yourself some deeper questions for sure. And then at other times, it was quite psychedelic because I also collaborated with GPT-3 on scripting the different characters in the last chapter of the show. And again, it went quite wild. So, because you can really ask it to create connections between things that you might know are related, but you don't quite know exactly how they would be related. And because how it works, it's trying to guess the next word, and they really want to try. I mean, the AI always they will try to come up with something. So sometimes it's really boring, and sometimes it's very wild. So.
So that leads me nicely to our next question, which is about vision. You've talked of your work as pushing the idea of having vision, of these hallucinogenic visions that find form. What does it mean for you to have vision, to have a vision? As someone who's so rooted in collaboration, working in all these different technologies, ancient and modern, what does that mean for you as an artist, to have vision or have a vision? Are they the same thing or separate?
Yeah, I believe in the power of dreams. So I feel like we would have so many reasons to be quite cynical and quite cold about what's happening to us. And it's quite scary. Like the climate crisis is really, really terrifying. And obviously, there is the route of activisms. You know, there are different routes you can take. And I think my route is I believe in the power of imagination. And I believe that if we can still dream, I think dreams will take us forward. I think humankind, we've always been dreaming. When you look at the early origins of humankind, the first statues that we've created, they were statues of goddesses, or like the Venuses, or mythological creatures like the lion of I can't remember the name of the cave, sorry, but there is this lion that is already like a sphinx almost. So you can see that from our very early origins, we were already creating mythological creatures and narratives to make sense of the world, right? Of where we come from, where we're going, and why why is the sun, like, why, you know, to make sense of the universe, right? So I think this is very deep in us. It's not a side thing. I think imagination is very much it's in us. It's in our genes. We need it to survive. And I would say that for me, that's what it means as an artist. I believing in the power of imagination, maybe I'm able to transcribe some of these, worlds into physical forms. So I would say that's my role in society. So I try to take it seriously and do my best. Yeah.
Your practice seems very generous. You know, you're working on some of these answers. Obviously, it's personal for you, but it's generous and generative. It feels like you are opening up portals for the audience as well. How much do you think of the audience? How much do you gauge success by audience interaction or engagement or feedback when you look back on work or even plan it?
Yeah, because I think about it all the time, but not in terms of audience. It's more what is the human experience of the show. So I don't think about really how would I say? I don't think in terms of it's the exhibition. I think in terms of the journey. When I think of the show, I think about the world and that I'm creating and how we navigate through it and how would I want humans to feel when they're in this world. So do I would want them to feel empowered or do I want them to feel small or gigantic or vulnerable or strong or, how do I want them to feel empathy or do I want them to feel angry or, like whatever it is, like I always think about how do we relate, us humans, how do we relate to these worlds that I'm creating and to these different beings. So yeah, I think about it all the time, but very much from the, human to human experience. So it's not really about, like, obviously and then, of course, if I get feedback that humans have seen my exhibition and they've been touched in different ways, of course I'm happy, but just because then I think, so the experience I've been willing to create is having the impact that I wanted it to have. So it's more like that. I'm hoping that people get what.
What did you want people to get from this show?
This show, it was so it's really much like a journey. So I wanted the first gallery to feel very present and very local. I wanted that some people who live in the area recognize the mural that I'm working, that is the starting point, because it's a mural that everyone I've been talking to about say, I know it, but I've passed by it all the time, but I've never stopped. So I wanted that people, notice that there was an element of care for the local area and the local communities. And then I guess I wanted that it's also a bit frightening, but it's still the beginning. Is still how would I say? It's a bit frightening, but it's a mural. So yeah, it's present, it's the now, but it's still something is happening. There is a process of decomposition, and then the tunnel. It feels like, I'm hoping it feels like it's a tunnel that doesn't really exist in the gallery, so we opened it. So I wanted that we discover the gallery also from a different perspective, and that without really thinking about it, you enter this tunnel and suddenly you realize that actually maybe you're in a maze or something. Like, I think it takes your mind to, maybe without realizing it, you've become an ant, in a way. And then I wanted that when you enter in the last gallery, it would be a bit like I always imagine the kids who discover the Lascaux cave for the first time. What I don't know. I just keep thinking about. Like I read just the story of these kids who were playing and they were, and suddenly they enter in Lascaux and the paintings, and you just step into a world that's been untouched. Or so that's what I wanted from the. And then realizing that obviously there is still a space for humans, because there are working platforms on which you can actually rebalance with this new world that is also synchronizing together. So obviously after there is an aspect of discovery. There are lots and lots of details in these works in the last gallery. And I guess I wanted also that it's quite exploratory, that you kind of get lost maybe in all the details.
It's a little Alice in Wonderland. You can sort of take your own potion with the elixirs in there as well. If this work is about process and open circuits, your new land artwork is about designation. You've said about this idea, instead of producing works of art, designating things as works of art. Can you tell us a little more about that? Because it's obviously a completely different scale and context than anything you've done before.
Yeah. So, for a while in parallel, but I think it's really connected to meys as well, because with meys already, I was thinking about making works that seem like distortions of a landscape. So they're not fully supernatural. They could almost have grown from forms. They're strangely familiar. So it's almost like a distortion. And then on a parallel kind of track, I've been thinking about, eventually that maybe we will, it's a bit extreme, and I don't know if I fully agree with what I'm going to say, but we might eventually stop producing anything, right? Like we might eventually, what happens when we eventually stop producing physical forms? And then I thought, oh my God, I love making sculpture. What am I going to do? But then anyway, I was just thinking, then what happens? So maybe what happens is that instead of creating new things, we designate existing things to become artworks. And it could be anything. It could be just anything, like anything. Life, your partner could become an artwork, and the sky, and anything could become an artwork, And it's all about, I guess it's designation and maybe poetry. So it's how you designate something, and then how do you transform it into an artwork. So what does it need to become an artwork? And so I've been working on my project, Horizons, in Colorado for 3 years now. And I really went through through this process of, first of all, starting thinking, oh my God, I'm doing a land art project. It needs to be seen from the sky, and it needs to be something that because you see also there are models in the history of art, people who have done land art projects, and there is like a language that's associated. So that's how I started, and then it took me maybe 2 or 3 years to realize that actually I didn't need to do much. I could just, maybe the landscape is the work. And so that's what I'm doing now. So I decided to, so for context, very quickly, it's a circle, one of those large circles that are used for intensive agriculture. So they are circles because they have a pivot irrigation system, so a tower in the middle that's pumping water through the aquifer and spinning around to irrigate the fields. And obviously, so in Colorado, there is a huge water crisis. So very simply, I was thinking, what happens to the aquifer, to the pivot irrigation system when they spin, but there is no more water to irrigate the field? So maybe they keep spinning and dancing, and that's how it started. And here I am. We found a gigantic circle, so farmers from in the St. Louis Valley in Colorado agreed to let me transform one of their fallow circles into an artwork. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And then so I thought, what happens when, instead of transforming this circle into something else, what if the circle is the artwork? So what if the rats and the weeds and the tumbleweeds and the sky and the cranes that are migrating there twice a year, what if the mountains, the sand dunes, what if the winds, like what if all of this is the artwork? And so then I thought, maybe what the land needs is to reconnect itself with its past and its present and its future. So what can I do? In a way, it's almost like what would be the most minimal touch I could have on the land? And then I thought about acupuncture. So what would happen if you do acupuncture at the scale of a landscape? So what would my needles look like? So there will be a series of wind-activated instruments, so that they're based on their weeds. They're like weeds. So there are all these weeds on the land that people call invasive. But actually, I think they're superheroes because they live there with no water, in extreme conditions. So I've transformed them into wind-activated instruments. They're really, really small, like really, really small, like this. And they're almost like divination instruments. And there's also a family of cranes that double as gigantic hammocks. So literally, there are cranes on which you can lie down. And again, thinking about designation. So if the land is the artwork, maybe the first thing you need is somewhere to lie, just to be able to stay there, to just look. So we're doing that, and I talked to geomancers. So there are people who can read landscapes, and they help me to place the pieces where the land needs help. So in places where maybe some communities of humans have died in the past, or animals have died, or maybe where there are knots or
Heal trauma.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And when does it open? It's 2 months' time, right?
End of July.
End of July. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, reading about your work, it's often discussed, people will mention to you, oh, you work in fact and speculation and fact and fiction. And I was wondering how slippery those terms are. Do you see a distinction between, things people describe as fact in your work and speculation, or is it all imagination and histories?
Yeah, it's quite blurry, but it's definitely not pure fiction because it's based on facts. So I guess for me it becomes interesting when it's anchored in something we know, because then it can really touch you. If it was purely fictional, it's outside of you, so I guess it's harder to relate to. But I think there are also different stages in my work. I mean, there are things that are maybe closer to things we really know, like we know very well. And maybe there are things that are somewhere in between, and maybe there are things that are much maybe further from us.
More intuitive imaginations.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marguerite.